Mr. Ian Liddell-Grainger.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much indeed. And I am pleased to have secured this debate for many reasons. And even though some of what I have to say may be distressing to hear, because crime, unfortunately, knows no boundaries. It will come no surprise that policing in Somerset is a matter of enormous concern to my constituents and hundreds of thousands across the country. To an outsider, Somerset conjures up an image of a peaceful backwater full of cider orchards and friendly folks with old-fashioned values. Unfortunately, like so many other parts of our nation, life is no longer like that. Rather alarmingly, the National Crime Agency now says that there are 90 organised crime groups operating in the Avon and Somerset area. It is no longer a few light-fingered thieves we have to worry about, it is big-time crooks. Organised crime in the United Kingdom costs £37 billion every single year. That is almost as much as the Brexit divorce bill to Brussels. Organised crime caused more deaths than terrorism, wars and natural disaster put together. And there are 90 organised crime groups in my county alone. Frankly, if you think about it, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it doesn't bear thinking about. The European Centre for Drugs and Drug Addiction has just named Bristol as the cocaine capital of Europe. I'm afraid that is not an accolade that any of us locally are proud of. The city has shot up the International Cocaine Leader Board. 12 months ago, Bristol was number 5 in the charts. Now it is number 1. There is a widespread drug misuse in so many corners of Somerset, which the police confess is way off their capacity to handle, let alone, I'm afraid, solve. Users frequently get off with a caution if they're caught at all. Dealers have major players to warrant anything approaching a crackdown. The force simply does not have the manpower to do anything other than cherry-pick to a huge, disastrous and growing problem. Just a fortnight ago, the Avon and Somerset Chief Constable admitted his force was losing the war against drugs, and I'm afraid, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is a very scary public statement to make. I do have enormous respect for the foot soldiers of our overworked police force. I've watched them do their job in circumstances that are difficult. I've joined them in cities on patrol and seen them risking their life and limb in action. The men and women in the ranks perform miracles and they defy the odds. But the odds, I fear, are stacked against them. They are not always well led, and they also suffer from the slings and arrows of erratic decision-making from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. I know my right honourable friend will probably know that I've had several bitter spats with the Avon and Somerset Commissioner, Mrs. Sue Mount-Stevens. Mrs. Sue Mount-Stevens has the uncanny knack of opening her mouth and inserting both feet into it, a remarkable achievement. On her first day as Chief Constable, first day of the job, she fired the Chief Constable. A few months later, she fired his successor, the very candidate she'd handpicked to replace him. The present Chief Constable must consider himself lucky to have survived a couple of years. But nobody can relax when the Commissioner starts talking. Last week, and I commend this to the House, she offered the benefit of her wisdom on the subject of drug smuggling. Don't risk Dover, she told her audience, because you might easily get caught, direct quote. She added if anything was smuggling drugs, her personal recommendation was somewhere safer, like Lyme Regis in Dorset. I'm sure the honourable member for Dorset's pleased. The local town exploded with justful anger. They call Lyme Regis the pearl of the Jurassic Coast, which it is. But Mrs. Mount-Stevens has renamed it Dope-on-Sea. Bang goes her chance of getting a gritting career with the Lyme Regis Tourist Board. Mrs. Stevens used to run the famous Mount-Stevens family bakery, and my right honourable friend, I should suspect, doesn't come as any great surprise to him, to learn it went bust when she was running it. Last week, after the Lyme Regis boo-boo, she baked an incredible humble pie and was forced to eat the lot. Frankly, it would be a bit of a challenge trying to run an effective police force with Sue Mount-Stevens permanently peering over your shoulder, especially when an arithmetic crime is arising against her. Everything seems to be going up. Knife crime is up 52% in a single year. That amounts to 634 additional crimes in the Avon and Somerset Police Force which knives were used. The police response was to organise Operation Spectre, a campaign aimed at educating young people, targeting hotspots and putting out knife surrender bins. This may sound like a lot of things officers should be doing all the time, but Operation Spectre lasted for only 7 days. Nothing like enough to make a difference, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I do not believe these major problems can be tackled with tokenism. Serious crime demands serious answers. Avon and Somerset and its Commissioner have been trumpeting Operation Remedy, which claims to make an extra 100 officers available to fight drug dealers. It certainly looks like a significant increase in manpower in Somerset for several years, and we've been paid by a £24 average council tax rise. But I'm sorry to say that I doubt if Operation Remedy can ever probe an effective remedy, because it is only lasting for 3 months. The Chief Constable promised it will make a big splash. Really? Operation Remedy comes to an end in June. Unfortunately, as we all know, be they a Northern MP or a Southern MP or whatever, drug barons never stop. Remember, the operation is being paid for entirely out of a hefty hike in council tax. I know that the Somerset Council's Peace Panel has given Mrs Mann-Stevens a hard time, demanding justification for the spending. They want to be sure it's not a waste of money. I actually think they have a very good reason to be cautious. I give way with great pleasure.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank you for giving me. I spoke to him beforehand. He will understand where I'm coming from. One of the great benefits of policing in my constituency, and I would suggest perhaps in his own as well, is community policing, having police officers in the community, in the estates, on the streets, in the rural communities, bringing the intel in to do with drugs and other things across the constituency. Does he feel that that's something that the police force in his own constituency could do more of? And if so, what would he like to see coming from the Minister to make sure that happens?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome that intervention for the reason I know this is policing in Somerset, but the whole country. It doesn't matter if in Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland or England, we are suffering the same. It is an endemic that we are yet not controlling. I'm not blaming the government, because this goes back to the 18 years I've been in Parliament. I think knife crime has gone up, but the rest of it hasn't greatly changed. The point you're making is it's frontline service, it's frontline officers, and I've spoken to the Right Honourable, the Minister, who has championed a lot of this for the time he's been there, and I would welcome his commitment to continue to fight this at every level. It's got to be community, as the Honourable gentleman rightly said, but also it's got to be led from the centre, with it trickling out through, dare I say, even bad police and crime commissioners in my case, but it's a great intervention. I of course, give way to my honourable friend.
Thank you, honourable friend, for giving way. South Gloucestershire, of course, falls under the Avon and Somerset Constabulary. And does he agree that if we're unable to get a handle on these bigger issues like knife crime and drugs and organised crime that he's talking about, then it's much more difficult to tackle low-level antisocial behaviour issues, which are the things that are most raised by constituents in South Gloucestershire?
I thank you for that, because we cover very much similar areas, and the honourable gentleman makes a very valid point. I'm going to come on to that because we've got some quite exciting news from the Somerset area, which I hope we can then leach across the border into South Gloucestershire, because I know that you've suffered the same stuff. You've got a motorway, the crime goes up and down the motorway, but I think you will all, I think the honourable member will also find that Bristol does suck in those resources, which I think we're all having in this round. I give way to the honourable lady from Bath.
I'm very grateful for him giving way, and yes, Bath also falls under the Avon and Somerset Constabulary. And while I'm not entirely sharing his criticism of the Police and Crime Commissioner, we in Bath had a problem that our police station was completely shut. We had no more police station. Fortunately, we now will get a police station back, but will he not agree with me that it is important that the opening hours are 24/7, because that's what makes the people safe and feel that they're actually being looked after by the police?
I think that's a very interesting comment. I will say to Malay, I don't know the situation in Bath, so I'm very grateful for her intervention. Certainly, I know the feeling that she's going through. We lost the police station in Minehead and then in Bridgewater, but they've built a purpose-built police station in Bridgewater, which has been highly successful, and the custody suite for Somerset is there. But it does absolutely put that point across, that we need the local policing in our areas. It doesn't matter if it's Bath, South Gloucestershire, wherever it may be. And the honourable lady is quite right to highlight that, and I agree with her. I can't agree with her over Sue Mount-Stevens. I think she's quite appalling, but that's a personal view. Of course, this is not and should not be seen just as a matter of policing. Clearly, many agencies need to be involved, which is what I've just been saying, if the root cause of rising crime is ever being tackled. So I welcome the approach that the Home Office is pushing. Sedgemoor, which is part of my constituency, has been selected as one of the 5 national pilot projects to help combat the threat of serious and organised crime. To me, this is no great surprise, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's an us to justified feather in the cap for Sedgemoor District Council, who I know works incredibly closely with the police, because I just said to the Honourable Lady Bath that the police headquarters is actually there. This project will tackle the impact of organised drug networks, like the recruitment of vulnerable young local youths to push drugs supplied by national dealers, a relatively known threat known by the catchphrase country lines. I give way to my honourable friend from North Devon.
I'm very grateful. I hesitate to do so, but to correct my honourable neighbour, I think it's county lines. And the point which I was seeking to make is that we share a border of constituencies and counties, and therefore of constabularies, Avon and Somerset Police and Devon and Cornwall Police. Will he reflect on 2 things briefly? Firstly, that the county lines drug running, which he mentions, is a vital thing that must be tackled across these borders. And secondly, will he join me in thanking the rank and file officers who do such hard work in my constabulary and in his to try to counter this crime?
I thank my honourable friend. We share the beauty of Exmoor between us, and my honourable friend's absolutely right. It's a very remote area, there are too many roads, and we know that it's not just drugs, it's also sheep and cattle and other things, so it is certainly hard. But I'm going to make, if I may, now some progress, because otherwise my honourable friend will have a little time to come back. And it was county lines, and I'm very grateful for my honourable friend's correction. They also work with health partners to combat the illicit sale of alcohol and cigarettes and the review and impact of rural crime. A good idea, particularly in the rural crime review. Rural crime has become the forgotten crisis in many parts of Somerset, as my honourable friend pointed out. Forgotten and ignored, some people feel. Sleepy sounding places like Stegumber and Crowcombe, believe it or not, have some of the highest rates of crime outside Taunton, and they're tiny. I invite you to, if I may, Mr Deputy, to what one farmer said when she wrote to me about her life in rural Somerset. The countryside is under siege. We've been subject to threats, physical and verbal assaults, trespass, criminal damage, and sometimes on a daily basis. But the response to 999 call-outs is absolutely abysmal. My husband was tending his livestock when he came across 2 individuals who was punched severely in the face, but despite ringing 999, an officer took 3 hours to show up. How much and how badly do we have to be injured before rural crime is taken seriously? I can assure you, my right honourable friend, this unfortunately is no isolated incident. Crime has scarred the beautiful countryside and invaded respected areas too, including the county town of Taunton. I have achieved some great degree of notoriety in this House for my striped criticism of Taunton, but in the way it's been ineptly run by an incompetent council. I recently quoted the crime figures in Taunton, which without any doubt are actually shocking. But tonight I've come armed with an excellent report and a great praise for its cross-party authors. It was completed by 5 Taunton Deane Borough Councils, 2 Conservative, 2 Labour, and chaired by an independent councillor. It throws a very harsh spotlight on the way crime has been handled, and in some cases mishandled. The councillors were given the task of assessing the impact of crime on the town and recommending action. They took the trouble to obtain evidence from residents and shopkeepers. One shop in Taunton Town Centre has been broken into twice by the same man in the last 2 months, costing £1,000 a time. The shopkeeper said, "I've no updated security because the insurance people aren't happy." The security filter said it was absurd because the only place you find this kind of security is a bank. A retired policeman serving of 23 years said he felt it was unsafe to take his young family into the town with the presence of aggressive beggars, street drinkers and drunkenness. One branch of a very big national clothing store reckons to lose £100,000 worth of goods every year because of aggressive shoplifting. Many people related their stories of abuse, assault, harassment from drug pushers, rough sleepers and vandals. It happens even in broad daylight in the historic heart of a once incredibly proud town. The evidence of the report is grim and depressing. The conclusion is that the committees are equally blunt. Neither the council or the elected custodians of Taunton Town Centre or the police are taking the lead to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour. Both need to take robust and expedient action. Taunton Deane Council introduced a public spaces order 3 years ago to get a grip on this, quite rightly so. But guess what? There's been no shortage of lights in the town. There hasn't been a single prosecution. It affects us all. The committee calls this situation woeful, and it's appalling. The Taunton Deane Council has concluded that police lack presence and don't respond to crime as they should. There is also criticism of Mrs Mount Stevens. For the partnership between Taunton and Council, the police said it lacks leadership, strategy and accountability. The Council deliberately grilled the antisocial team in Taunton that there's an iron that the team lacked credibility due to their lack of knowledge and understanding of the issues. Taunton's antisocial behaviour team suffers from a skill set, deficient and poor management. I don't blame the Council for that. I did not make this stuff up. In fact, it's one of the few T's and pieces of work to come out of the Council for years. And that is the reason I learned. I wonder if anybody in the position of leadership would take it seriously. Taunton has any more rough sleepers than anywhere else in Somerset. Taunton as a town has boarded up shops and derelict buildings. No wonder travellers invaded with their caravans, and no wonder drug dealers congregate there. It's such a shame, because these big problems should have simple solutions and not being done.
Obviously, I'm a little bit concerned. I have greatest respect for the honourable gentleman. I'm a bit worried it is somebody else's constituency that we are discussing, and the member's not here. I understand it's part of probably what's being said, but I do feel it's a little bit unfair to the member who represents Taunton Deane.
Speaker, I wrote to her this afternoon to say that I would, and I also made it clear I was talking about other parts. This report is actually very good because it reflects on my area as well as hers, and it shows that all of us, Mr Speaker, have a problem here. It's the only report I've seen in 18 years as an MP that has taken this issue in our county to this level, and it is cross-party, and I therefore think I have the right to do it. But I have made it clear to the Honourable Lady in writing, and I thank you for that, because Mr Speaker has had his concerns about that as well. I will just conclude, if I may, and allow my Honourable Friend to have a couple of minutes. The same council hired street wardens in 2014, but only for a month. The committee report said it would cost less than £114,000 a year to employ a proper team for a whole year. Taunton Deane is going to spend £1 million on fencing to hide a very nasty site. I don't disagree with that. But they want to borrow £16 million to build a hotel. Surely it helps my area, it helps all of us to find the money for town wardens. Policing in Somerset is not cheap. It does cost the whole county £284 million a year. I believe they could do more with the officers and money. Perhaps they could do it with too much interference from Prime Commissioners. We do need to take more than a token operation on this, and a one-week clampdown on knife crime doesn't cut any mustard with anybody. It isn't enough to have sticking plasters. There's a clear role to be played by local authorities. Some are doing it well, others are lagging behind. I hope my right honourable friend will some way disagree with what I said. Thank you.